Okay, there's just a few things from the report I'd like to highlight. So we did have a very well-attended open house a week or so ago on the CARP floodplain mapping. We had originally thought we'd bring forward the report to this board meeting today, but given there was a fair number of questions that we just wanted to take time and space to engage with some of the players on. We are now planning to bring it forward to the PNP in June and to the board in July. There's no major issues that we don't think can't be resolved through discussion and just having people better understand the methodology and the findings. So it's the delay is really just to create time and space to have those follow-up discussions with some of the landowners about the concerns and them not feeling that we're rushing the process. The Kashwakamak Dam Class EA, we have a public information center scheduled for next week, and a variety of notices went out on that. So it's going to be a remote, like what do we call this? Virtual, thank you. It's going to be held virtually, and it's going to walk folks through the EA process, the steps that have been taken to date, any comments and concerns raised to date, and outline for people the interim conclusions that the consultants have tabled. And so the plan there as well is to bring forward the preferred solution to the board later in the year after this consultation period. We've had some success with some projects being completed recently. The land cover update was done through partnership with our other CAs in Eastern Ontario and funding from the federal government. So we now have an updated land use layer that we use for our floodplain mapping. Land use is very important to understand when we're calculating the runoff coefficient from different parcels of land, and that helps us to understand what flows are coming off the landscape. I've outlined here a number of projects that we are now actively moving forward with that were approved in our capital plan. I wanted to highlight that the 2024 monitoring program, the field monitoring, is going to be focusing this year on the Clyde River watershed, which comprises a couple of your municipalities, as well as our standardized work on Mississippi Lake, Dalhousie Lake, and Crotch Lake. Good news, we're almost totally now sold out of the summer camps, all 4 weeks. I think there's maybe just eight positions available in the last session. So really pleased to see such uptake from the community. I did want to let you know that we are pursuing conversations with both RBCA and Toronto Region Conservation Authority about shared service agreements. So shared service agreements are essential now that the way the Act is written, that if we're providing services to each other. And we've had longstanding relationship with RVCA, Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, on some shared services. But we've also been exploring some opportunities for such with TRCA, which of course is the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, is the largest in Ontario, and they have resources that nobody else has, quite frankly. So we reached out to them a couple of weeks ago on some things. So stay tuned. They'll be coming back to the board when we want to actually execute those agreements. And then you can see that we've retained a good number of summer students to help deliver on our various programs. And one of the things that Stacy will be mentioning during her report is that as of yet, we haven't received notification of receiving any student grants this summer. That's not necessarily unusual for this time of year, which is why we always have to hire the students before we get confirmation of the grants coming in. But it does have implicit in it a certain amount of risk. So the last thing I wanted to highlight to you was the La Tournelle Conference happening this fall. For the past few years, the board members haven't been attending. And of course, during COVID, barely anybody was attending and we couldn't get in even when we tried. But Last year, staff were able to attend, and staff will be attending this year as well. But historically, it was something that, particularly if a board member was interested in taking on a greater leadership role in the organization, that they participated in the La Tournelle conference, because it gets you exposure to a whole lot of other CAs, the work they're doing, to meet with other board members from other organizations, and to, begin to also understand how Conservation Ontario works, and some of the issues that they're dealing with at the provincial level. So I just open this up to you, that if any of you are thinking, as you know, it's 2-year term, and this is Paul's 2nd year, but at the end of this year, he's going to have to step down from that role. And so at some point, I think it would be really helpful if some of you thought about whether or not you want to take on a leadership role. And if you do, let me know if you want to attend this conference. Typically, we carpool down for the 2-day conference. And so it's a really great educational opportunity for both staff and board members alike. So I suggest you go on the website and check it out. And of course, Janet here's been once or twice, at least 3 times. Okay. I was trying to, once we went together, but I didn't know. Okay. So has anybody else been here to La Tournelle amongst the board members? No? No? Okay. So let's talk to Janet. Okay. So that's all on the GM update. Happy to answer any questions you might have about the rest of the report.
Okay, are there any questions, Shelley? Janet?
Yeah, so I'll just say, yeah, I would highly recommend going to La Tournelle. And I would say, even if you weren't looking for a chair or vice chair position, if you're looking even at a finance committee chair or something, that it's well worth going. I had a question about a wording in here, which I found intriguing, and this might be more of a question for Europe. And that is, it says under land inventory, recent modeling of the Carp River shows that the pond functions as much for flood control as it does for stormwater management. And I didn't understand the difference between that, because it seems to me that stormwater management helps with flood control. So how is that different?
Here we go. So is this question related to off again? Here we go. Yeah, so I was saying that the Glencairn facility was designed and built as a flood control facility, not as a stormwater management pond. It's the only facility in that Carp River corridor. The difference is how it was designed. It provides, that flood control. Most facilities in the upper Carp River watershed are actually the stormwater facilities are built to handle up to 10-year design storms. They are not even designed to handle a 100-year storm. Whereas the Glencairn, it was designed to be handling larger storm events. Was
this like after the major flooding event?
I think it was related to the development of the Glencairn area, and like this, it's all fully developed, and the original upper Carp River lost the floodplain capacity. It was all channelized, right? So we see a large increase of flows, from that portion of the watershed.
So just one more question, because when I look at stormwater ponds, I mean, they're all taking off the surface water from all these hardscapes. Isn't that helping with flood control?
It doesn't. It doesn't. It really depends. Like sometimes it's also the timing of the, like they kind of slow down, the release of the water. And sometimes it's all about the timing, and it can actually be, sometimes it might actually make things worse. because the timing might actually come later into the receiver, like the Carp River, at the time that the receiver is peaking, right? So it's really, we cannot really say that it's just improving or not. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Thank you. I was very involved with that report that was done after the 2009 flooding. There was two reports. One was causes, the other was what are we going to do about it? There was over $10 million put into that particular facility. And what the city did was dredge it because there was very little capacity in there, which is what happened during the floods was the water backed up from the storm water pond into the systems, started blowing out the covers on the laterals in the houses and even some of the storm water catch basins. Those covers were blown from the reverse pressure from the pond malfunctioning. So they dredged it out. There was two constrictors that were part of the pond, which were little culverts about the size of a basketball. One of them was totally plugged. The other was, the constrictor was restricted, was the way they put it. So it didn't have full capacity, so it couldn't even transfer the water into the carp. It was all staying at the pond and backing up. So to answer your question, there was quite a bit of work done after '09. I think it was completed in 2012, 2013 was when the work on the pond was actually done. So, okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for that, Alan. All right, Yuri, you could have stayed at the podium there. You're up next for the Wiki program update.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is for information only. Basically, as you know, the WECI program stands for Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure, and it is a capital cost sharing program through WECI. The province through MNRF basically provides matching funds to CAs, conservation authorities, for their infrastructure projects. And us, as all other CAs, we basically heavily depend on this mechanism on WECI funds. With the exception of maybe one or two projects, all our capital infrastructure projects that were basically indicated in our 10-year capital plan are WECI projects. So in the past, the call for applications from WECI came in January, and the submission deadline was always the month later. It was in February, and by May, by this time of the year, we received the confirmation of funding. This year, the call for applications was just announced, I think, at the end of last week. So it basically came 4 months later than usual. And on top of that, there were some significant changes made to the program this year. So I will read them so I don't forget about any of these. So basically, starting this year, this is going to be a 2-year program now. However, you know, all projects that are approved for year 1 must be still completed in the same year, in year 1. And then all projects that will be approved for the second year can only start at the beginning of the second year. So we cannot proceed with these projects now. We will need to wait till April 2025, and then we can start with these projects. The other change is that the funding cannot be carried over from year 1 to year 2. And then also the confirmation of year 2 funding will be not provided this year. So we will have to wait for it until the next year projects will start in April 2025. And then there will be no separate call for applications in the next year. So obviously, you know, this creates some new challenges to us that we need to deal with. I guess the one most significant is that this year, at least, you know, there won't be enough time for us to complete our projects because since, you know, the call was just announced, we will wait at least till the deadline, submission deadline is in June this year. So we will be waiting at least end of July, August for the confirmation that we were successful or not, which really leaves us with less than 6 months this year, right, to complete the project. Everything needs to be done by March next year. The other, I guess, aspect is that now we will need to proceed and apply for projects that are basically indicated in our capital plan for this year, but also for projects that we indicated and scheduled for next year. And this is sometimes problematic because, you know, we're talking about infrastructure projects and, you know, these are phased projects. You know, you do a study and the study results outcome will actually define the scope of work for the next phase of the project. Right now, we need to be creative and really think what the next phase needs to be. And I guess the other implication of this is that if we are not successful, for instance, for year one project, then there will be no, as I mentioned, call for proposals next year, which means that we will need to now wait 2 years for the next opportunity to reapply. So this might obviously cause some delays in the execution of our capital infrastructure plan. So for this year in our capital plan, we had 3 projects lined up for WECI. It was one for farm condition assessment. Then we had 2 dam safety reviews, one for Lanark and one for Widow. And so considering these tight deadlines now, what we are proposing to do is basically go ahead and issue requests for proposals now in advance of ahead of basically receiving the confirmation deadline, a confirmation of the funding basically ahead of time, and indicate in the RFPs that you know these projects are subject to funding approval because we won't have time to complete these projects. And then I guess for the following year, so for the 2025-2026, we had 2 projects in the capital plan. One was Kashwakamach design, and the other one was public safety measures for Lanark. So I don't think we have another choice, but just we need to apply for these projects now at the same time. So this is kind of like a quick summary where we stand with WECI this year. Thank you.
And just to provide a comment as well, we have made our concerns known to John Jordan and have provided him with his office with the information that trying to do these projects on a hurry-up basis is problematic for these large projects, and asking why they can't provide like commitments for 2 years of funding and that sort of thing, and make sure that we can do some carryover things slow. But so we have done that in the background. We did that last week. Okay, questions?
Just to confirm, the Farm Lake condition assessment will be done this year?
This project will be done this year, yes.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Yuri. Certainly challenging times to try and get these projects moved through. Okay, and you're still at this. You're still on the stand there, as they say. So we now have the ice management strategy report.
For those of you online, yes, there is silence. It's just Euro's trying to pull up the presentation.
Doesn't, yeah, can I move this? Okay, that's okay.
You all right?
All right, okay, thank you. Um, So I guess I would start with why are we looking at ice? The reason is that the presence of ice along water bodies, lakes, and rivers can be associated with some risks. And the first risk that we can see and can be enhanced by ice formation and movement is the shoreline erosion. Then one very important risk and hazard is obviously flooding. Ice can basically form ice jams in rivers and cause localized flooding. And the flooding can be upstream of the ice dam, but also downstream if the dam breaks up. Then the presence of ice can also cause property damage, you know, such as docks on ice, but also, you know, infrastructure along water courses. And obviously the last one is public safety, which is related to basically recreational activities of public on ice, you know, snowmobiling, ice fishing and all that. So the Ontario Regulation 686-21 kind of outlines those obligations conservation authorities have regarding, you know, the programs and services for ice management, and all CAs must develop and implement ice management plan by the end of this year, by December 31st, 2024. So to comply with this requirement, we basically developed our draft plan, and this plan has these three objectives that you see on the screen. The first is to inform our MECA flood forecasting and warning team on the ice breakup times. These are very important for us to know when we can be start basically managing our dams and lakes. Also, formation of fragile ice, which can cause risk of flooding, and then ice jamming. So, as I said, ice jamming can cause flooding as well. Then this program will also inform us on any shoreline erosion monitoring activities that we need to take. And then the last one is basically to understand how the ice regime is changing and how this change may basically change the risk of natural hazards. And this is an important one because what we see is with the changing climate, we see that the ice formation, ice duration, and ice depth is actually very sensitive to the changes in winter temperatures and whatnot. So what we anticipate is we will be seeing, you know, the ice duration season to be shorter and shorter, and the ice might be unsafe for recreation throughout the winter, right? So there might be some changes. Our first ice management plan, basically we were proactive and we started back in 2022, and we developed our first draft monitoring program, which then we tested in the winter of 2022-2023. And it was kind of like a trial and error the first year. And in the following spring, in 2023, we kind of updated the program and enhanced it with, you know, the lessons learned and everything else. And then the second season was actually the last winter, 2023-2024. And again, this past spring, we sat down and we tweaked it. And I think at this point, we have a pretty solid plan in place. And one other thing I would like to say is that staff safety is very important and integral part of this monitoring. all staff that does ice monitoring must have valid ice safety training. We have SOP that we developed for basically these activities, and also we have a very detailed work plan that outlines, how this work is being completed in the field. So I guess with that, I would like to then pass it on to Brian and Joe. Brian is a water resources engineer in my group, and Joe is technologies in our ops team, and they were both instrumental in developing and testing this program. Brian?
Thank you. Hello. So yeah, as Yura said, we've been running our ice monitoring program for 2 years now. And so we monitor for river ice, we monitor for ice jamming, which typically occurs in the spring when the ice comes off rivers and lakes. It can get clogged or jammed at river constrictions or other obstructions, which can lead to flooding. We also monitor for frazzle ice. Frazzle ice forms when there's a drop in temperature, and the ice forms little pellets and balls, which then get carried to the bottom and they stick on the substrate. And this can cause flooding, or it can also lead to issues when it happens at dams or at water treatment plant intakes, where it clogs the intake pipes or the trash racks and can reduce the power generation or the amount of water that's taken in. Can lead to additional efforts and costs to clean them and to remove all the frazzle ice. It can also lead to damage of infrastructure and equipment. And we also monitor for lake ice. So for lake ice, we monitor both the depth as well as the ice duration. Lake ice doesn't typically cause flooding, but it does cause other issues such as shoreline erosion and damage to infrastructure such as docks and boathouses. And as you also mentioned, it poses risks to winter activities. So we monitor throughout our watershed. We monitor now it's green. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so we monitor lake ice at 3 locations, Mazenah, Silver, and Mississippi Lake, to give a representative overview of our watershed as like an upper, a mid, and a lower watershed lake. And these are monitored bi-weekly as well as on an as-need basis. So the river ice, as I mentioned, we monitor on an as-need basis, and some of these triggers that we use to go and monitor include significant increases or decreases in temperature. Increases in temperature could result in ice breakup, and significant drops in temperature can lead to frazzle ice. Also, we monitor our hydrometric network, and when there is an observed increase in water elevation without increase in flows, that's often indicative of an ice jam or localized increase in water levels. So we'll go out and monitor then. And when we get notifications or comments from the public, we'll also go out and do monitoring. There's been not a whole lot to report back in terms of our river ice jamming. There's been no observed ice jamming or ice buildup or flooding associated with ice along our rivers in the 2 years we've been running this monitoring program. In terms of lake ice monitoring, we monitor for lake thickness. We do this at several locations throughout the lake to get an idea of the spatial variability of the ice thickness, as well as to get representative lake-wide lake ice thickness values. With this information, we hope to gain a better understanding of how ice thickness varies spatially and temporally. So we use our lake ice thickness observations to develop an empirical model. The field data is used to calibrate the model, and then the model in turn is used to predict ice thickness. These predicted ice thickness values are used to inform our ice monitoring needs and when we can go out and do field work. And with our model, we can also predict future ice thickness based on forecasted temperatures. That, of course, is only as good as the forecast is. So here's an example of our ice model calibration. What you're looking at here is on the y-axis, that's the vertical axis, we have measurements of ice thickness that we took in the field, where each symbol is an actual measurement we took. The different colors represent the 3 lakes we monitor. Red is Mississippi, blue is Silver, and green is Mazenal Lake. Do I have to keep close to it to stay on, or? All right. The solid lines are our predicted ice thickness values based on our empirical model. Again, with the same color scheme, red for Mississippi, blue for Silver, and green for Mazenal Lakes. And the symbols are our observations. So as you can see here, there's fairly good agreement between the theoretical and the observed. And that's because we use these values to calibrate the model. But this is useful because going forward, we can then use our calibrated model to predict what it will be next year so we know when we're allowed to get on the ice. And then we also run a citizen science campaign. This has been running for the past 2 years, where we try to engage local residents to collect ice phenology data. Ice phenology is basically duration, so we get them to collect some basic parameters, including ice on, freeze up, break up, and ice off. And for this, we're hoping to be able to gain a much broader idea of ice duration and phenology in our watershed than we can collect with our own resources. Right, you're up, Tim.
Afternoon, everybody. Again, my name's Joe Arbor. I'm for the operations department. This is our crew, which consists of a minimum of 3 people. The requirements or training that is required to do this is take a 2-day ice water rescue course. Usually it's held in Ottawa, and they just basically train you to do self-rescue and rescue another individual if need that somebody had fallen through. So we have one person that sits on shore and basically monitors us as we walk out about 1.5 kilometers, which is quite far. That person has a 2-way radio, and we are constantly staying in communication with each other, letting them know what ice thickness is that we are walking on, what the conditions are. And the first person, so before I jump ahead, we have a pre-plan that we do here, and it requires all our equipment to be ready, that is fit, and we head off to the site. We get water flows to find out what's the flows of the water going out onto the lake. And first we get there, we don our survival suits. We ensure we have our ice picks in our pocket. We have a whistle, we have a throw bag. And then in our pockets as well, we have 3 ice anchors each for each person. And we have a 60-meter rope. And what happens is we walk out to the first station, we have a crew leader, and in a video you'll see one of them will be having a big pole, which we call staff, and you basically sounding the ice when you're walking out to your first hole that you're going to sample. And you're listening just for hollowness or cracking on the surface, or even just yourself walking, you're listening for all those signs. So this guy goes out with his auger and he gets to a first sample, which is the GPS coordinate, and he drills a hole. He measures the ice with a ruler, and then he will tell me that I can walk out to him, providing that we have 7 inches of ice, black ice, or combined ice. So if we have 4 inches of black, we need another 6 of white ice, because white ice is considered half the strength of it. So we get out there, we monitor whether how much the snow depth, whether there's top water, if there's any visible pressure cracks. This is our measuring stick here that we use. We have our electric gas auger, which is really nice and light. It's battery operated, not gas, sorry. So we measure the thickness of the snow and we monitor the water temperature and air temperature. We plug in the GPS coordinates. Then the one guy that's doing the measuring, he will read how much black ice and how much white ice there is. And then we move on and we start the whole system up. We get our ice screws out, we tether off our leader, and he walks another, it's quite far from one station to another. There's usually, Mississippi Lake has 4 stations, Silver Lake has 3, and Mazenau has four holes as well out there. Now I do notice between Mississippi Lake, Silver Lake, and Mazenau that there is a huge difference on the timing that we can get onto the lake. Mississippi Lake, no problem. Usually mid-January, early January. Silver, last year, we had two locations, one down at the park, and we had 3 stations there that we would do. And we would literally walk from the campground straight up the whole lake. And we noticed on Silver Lake, you got these gas holes, and it was very, very strange here that, as you can see, you're going to see these 2 little dots up at the top left-hand corner. That's myself and Rob. And as we were walking out, we got to our first destination. That was okay. And as we were walking out further on, we were taking the staff and we were hitting, and actually the staff went right through the ice. And it's gas holes. So it's vegetation that's underneath and it's decomposing, which is creating a little bit of heat, and it's turning the water. So water should be cold at the top, but the water is actually warmer at the bottom and it's rolling over. And so it's eating the ice from underneath. And also, if you get a lot of top water and you get a lot of pressure cracks, as we get into here, you're going to start seeing all these little you're going to see a little hole, and then you're going to see some spider lines coming off of it. And that's the gases from underneath. And then when you have top water, water has to go somewhere, and it's going to find a little hole, and it's just going to drill into the ice. And this is what you have to be really careful for. So how do you go back here, Brian? So this was up at Mazenau Lake. And Mazenau Lake, we usually are not on that ice until, I would say, February at most. So Rob and I walked onto the ice. We were right there at the boat launch, and we noticed that the ice sounded a little hollow. So Rob starts banging with this pole, and sure enough, he goes right through. So that's what that pole is for, is to make sure that because you're not going to drill a hole every 2 feet, you got to use your common sense and the sounds of what the ice is making. That pole also is sort of a life rescue as well. It's got 2 ropes, one on the other end and one on the top end. And if he had gone through, he would be able to wrap his arms in that rope, and I'd be able to grab the other, lay down on the ice, of course, and pull him up and out. Just this way.
Yep.
So that's all I got. Questions?
All right, thank you very much. That's been
Sorry. Talking about Mazenau Lake, and you said you were at the boat launch. Was that in the park and Bonneca Park, or where was that boat?
That was, is it South Shore Road? On Masna, it's not in, it's on the other side of the park.
Oh, okay, like north of the park?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I know this year was very troublesome for anybody to get on.
It was. I want to say it
Masna.
was South Masna Heights Road. I
Oh, okay,
believe.
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
okay, I know where you are.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting stuff. Are you planning to make the information from the monitoring available during the winter in real time or semi-real time? Or are you concerned about the liability issues associated with giving people ice thickness data?
Yeah, I think that's our main concern. Currently, we're not planning on releasing it primarily for that reason. We don't want people to think that this is representative of all the lakes.
So what sort of end of year report are you planning to put out? I don't think there's much on the website at the moment.
Yeah, each monitoring season so far we've developed or we've written a comprehensive report. I'm not aware of when or if it'll be released.
Okay,
Euro, Sally, does anyone have?
I was going to talk
How
to
do you want
that.
that? Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, Euro and I haven't discussed this on an approach that we feel comfortable with to bring forward to the board. So as of yet, it's not publicly released, especially since for the past 2 years, this was our trial years, just as we were trying to figure out and develop the program. But we can certainly come back to the board with a recommendation on how we release this information and or if we release this information, because again, it's not intended to inform recreational users of when it's safe to use the ice.
Kathy, then Mary Lou.
Thank you. I was going to ask, just from this report until I saw this video, whether or not you're using drones at all. That would be very helpful, but I think this video shows that you are. I just was also wondering if you are you working at all, or have you ever asked like Hydro Ottawa or Hydro One how they're using their drone technology, just so that they can monitor constantly?
I don't believe we've been in contact with Hydro One I don't believe we've been in contact with Hydro One to discuss how they use their drones.
I just might. I mean, also, the Transit Commission, Glenn's the chair of, they have amazing drone footage of everything that's going on there too, as well, monitoring. And they talked about even using types of drones to monitor the catenary system on top of the LRT. So I think there's a lot of expertise out there in terms of how you can use drones most effectively. So I would just recommend that you maybe connect with some others.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Mary Lou.
Well, in a way, my question has been answered in that you've said you haven't released any data and you haven't figured out when to release it. But very, very, very quickly, did you see significant changes between the first year and the second?
In terms of
In
like ice
terms of
thickness?
timing, ice thickness?
Yeah, the 2 years were quite different, which you could probably expect based on the very different winters we've had. So this past year, the ice season was much shorter. The ice thicknesses were thinner. We couldn't get on until much later. And so that's not really indicative of anything going forward because there's lots of interannual variability. But between those 2 years, we did see quite a bit of variability and differences. Yeah.
Thank you. Janet.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. I know the only reason we're doing this is because it's now required by the ministry, right? Really? Like to the same level?
So Janet's question is, we're doing this because the government's now requiring to do it, but we did a proactive on this and got it started early. And is it being done to the same level?
My understanding is we started it because the legislation was coming in. So we started ahead of time just so that by the time it got in place, we would have a good program in place. But it is very useful for us in other reasons than just to meet the legislative obligations.
I had a follow on to that because I was going to ask you how useful it really is, because of course the Conservation Authority has run for over 50 years without it. right? And I know that, and with climate change and so on, you know, that might be interesting. But I guess then the question is, this is a plan. I read through the plan. I don't see any cost in the plan. Like, how much does this cost? And I know we saw it in the budget, but I don't remember the numbers, but I would assume a plan normally would have like an annual cost associated with it, right? So just to assume that maybe you want to take a look at the plan and put something like that in it. No?
So some initial investments were absolutely made in all that safety equipment and training, et cetera. In terms of annualized costs, we had a working estimate of, I think it was between 5 and 10, was it? Something in that order, if you want to correct me.
That was the initial investment, Sally. I think the ongoing investment is more or less around $2,000 per season. And again, it really, the big item is the training that we need to provide to staff every 3 years. So it's like, you know, it can go up and down again from year to year, depending on where we do the training.
Okay. So as Janet has segue into, we need to approve this ice management plan for the province, and I have a motion here. Resolved that the Board of Directors approve the ice management plan attached to report 3419-24. Do I have a mover? Okay, Dina, second. Roy. Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to the vote. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And thanks, Guy, for being proactive on this stuff and getting it in place for us. So,
Thank you.
okay, our next topic is Palmerston Canto Conservation Area lease renewal, which has been going on forever.
So good afternoon. As Mr. Chair said, I'll be providing an update on the lease agreement with Palmerston Canado and the Township of North Frontenac. So for those of you who were part of the board tour last year, we did a visit to Palmerston Canado. I believe that was the only time we got rained on. So this will be the culmination of about an 11-month show and tell. So we did visit the beach, if everybody remembers, for those of you that were there, we took a trip down to the beach. There's a 20-acre parcel on Palmerston Lake that is a natural sandy beach. There's parking and then other amenities there. So in 2017, a group of volunteers approached the township with a plan to be able to kind of revitalize that area. The township was a little reluctant to invest a substantial amount of funds into a property they don't own. So at that point, it was decided that MVCA would enter into an option to purchase agreement with the Township of North Frontenac. It was at that point that there were a handful of land ownership conflicts between MVCA and a local private landowner. And then ever since then, so that now at this point, the conflicts have taken by far longer to resolve than anyone would have thought. We have made some traction in recent months, and we're hoping to be able to move towards a resolution in the near future. But at this point, so the lease agreement for the overall conservation area is up for renewal. So based on timelines, it is recommended that the GM be authorized to renew the current agreement, including the beach parcel, and then we will continue to hopefully push to a resolution on the land conflicts. And at which time, once that is completely dealt with, we'll be able to come back to the board with that resolution and hopefully the ability to move forward on the purchase agreement with North Frontenac and the 20-acre beach parcel.
Okay, any questions for Scott? No? Okay, I have a resolution here. The resolution says, resolved that the Board of Directors authorize renewal of the 5-year lease with the Township of North Frontenac to operate and maintain Palmerston Canto Conservation Area, including the beach and associated amenities. Do I have someone who will move that? Okay, Glenn moves, seconded. Okay, Jan. As I said, this one's been around for a while, so hopefully this lease will not be required in its fullness. And I know staff and stuff are doing a great job in getting us through this. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further comments? All in favor? It's carried. Okay, our next one is designation of provincial officers, and for Rachel, and Sally is carrying that. Nope. Oh, sorry, lands conservation strategy update.
Okay, so a year ago, I brought forward a work plan to complete this project. This is one of the 6 mandatory deliverables, the ice management strategy or plan being another one. So this is also due the end of this year. So a fair amount of work has been completed over the past year, but it is behind schedule from where I'd hoped we'd be at this time. We are making really good progress at this point. There were other things that had to take precedence ahead of this. But where we're at right now is that we're almost completed the current state document, and the needs assessment is well underway. And so the goal right now is to bring those reports forward to the Planning and Policy Committee in June. And then to the board in July, and then to embark on a more comprehensive public engagement program. I have been doing some small outreach to some groups, primarily our service delivery partners like the Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust, to the local Lanark Climate Action Group, to local farming, agricultural entities. I have scheduled meetings with all of your councils, and I'm trying to get into county councils, with the exception of the city, where I have a targeted meeting with relevant city staff who are working on this type of work. So my goal is that at the June meeting, we'll be able to sort of paint that current state needs assessment for everyone, and then discuss, well, where do we want to go from here? And some of the reasons why I've been doing this initial bit of outreach is because a lot of people react to the word acquisition, which is part of the mandate we've been given by the province, or the direction that this policy document has to contain policy regarding both acquisitions and disposals. And when you start to talk acquisitions, and if you put any sort of pen to paper on this sort of thing, people are going to start questioning what your intent is, why you're doing this, et cetera. So that's why the small targeted outreach that I'm doing right now is to make sure that people are clear on why we're even doing this study, this project, and what our objectives are in the global sense around this. As well, another key component is the integration of the work that we do in this area with others operating in this sphere, including, as I mentioned, municipalities, but also the province and the counties, which is why I'm trying to get out and meet with all of them as well, to make sure that there's a clear understanding that CAs are not interested in taking over the world. We're not, interested in, expanding, our purview significantly. It's a question of engaging with others operating in the sphere to figure out how we want to collaborate around shared issues. So it's been going well so far, and lots of meetings booked coming up between now and when we'll present to the PNP in June. And I think that by the time the board reconvenes in July, we'll have a lot of really good information to discuss. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sally. I know you've been working hard on this, and we've had a few discussions on some of the aspects. Questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. So we'll move on to designation provincial officer. Rachel needs designation. I think that's pretty straightforward. Or is there anything you need to explain there, Sally?
Just that the board has to delegate powers to her under the act. That's the purpose of this report.
Okay. So the motion is resolved that the board of directors appoint Rachel Cloutier to enforce Ontario Regulation 41/24 and Ontario Regulation 686/21 of the Conservation Authority Acts. Do I have someone to move that? Moved by Kathy, seconded by Jeff. Any discussion? No? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and now we have the proclamation of new ministerial powers under the Conservation Act. And Sally is going to enlighten us on what the minister can now do.
So the the powers that that have been proclaimed were set out in the Conservation Authorities Act some time ago, but they weren't proclaimed, meaning they weren't, put into action. So we've known they've been coming down the pipe for some time, but we are anticipating greater dialogue between ourselves and the province on that, what that would look like, how that would come into effect, any sort of guidelines and the like. And so the challenge is that where we find ourselves right now is that those provisions of the Act have been proclaimed and are now in force. The minister can prevent us from issuing a permit, from considering it, can control the process, but then walk away at the end of the day and have no liability or for that permit that minister has so approved. So as you can imagine, this is a huge concern to conservation authorities. The letter that's attached to my board report, is from Conservation Ontario to the ministry saying, can we press the pause button? Can you please engage with us to agree on sort of the rules of engagement, as it were? Can you please establish a technical committee? Because, with the greatest respect, Minister, you have no knowledge in this area. And you need to have, respected technical advisors, supporting you in this. And can you please be explicit that if you approve something, that you will be held responsible and accountable for the permit, not the CAs in whose jurisdiction you authorized that work. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't heard anything back from the ministry, and we're in a stay tuned mode. I'm not anticipating this to affect this CA anytime soon. We're kind of, in the boonies compared to where this is really happening, a lot in the GTA. It might happen in RBCA's jurisdiction. I don't know. So it's something we need to monitor and keep on top of, but I'm hopeful that this doesn't affect us in the near term. And I am also hopeful that the ministry sees the value in what Conservation Ontario has recommended and does press the pause button and engage with us on, how we're all going to make this work.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of hopefuls there. Janet.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, are conservation authorities liable for a decision that the minister makes? I mean, that means that somebody could sue if something goes wrong and they're going to sue the conservation authorities?
That is exactly the concern.
But the unbelievable? Okay, any other questions? It was a very hot topic at the recent meeting that we attended. So it'll be interesting to see where it comes out. I think the ministry is probably sitting back and saying, oh, we hadn't thought of that. And it'll be interesting to see where it comes down. Okay. Okay. Budget control report, Stacy. And she told me in advance that we're still in the black.
Yes. Still good. Actually, overall, right now, we're pretty much right on track for the year. We're just under 25% of our budget at the first quarter. There's a few anomalies I wanted to bring up. WECI, obviously, as Euro mentioned in his report, is a little bit of a concern. Currently, we are definitely looking at proceeding with farm, but we had not budgeted to receive WECI funding for that. It was a hopeful, but not a definite because of the type of structure it is. So that doesn't, if we proceed with that, but don't get WECI funding, it doesn't impact. The summer job grants, as Sally mentioned, I looked this morning and we're still pending, waiting approval. We had budgeted to receive about 30,000 out of roughly 70,000 budgeted for summer students. On that, we are related to that. Our interest revenue is currently quite a bit higher than we were budgeting, so that would be a good offset. We do need to, I think, probably in future start considering whether we budget to receive any summer grants or just if they come in, it's a nice surprise and we count it towards surplus. Last year, the summer student grants for the museum, which is through Young Canada Works, not through the Canada Summer Jobs Program, in April, or they told us we weren't getting it. So one of the people that was hired was an over 30, and then they came back in July and said, oh, well, you can have it. By whether they didn't get the uptake. So we were able to cover one person, but it's very last minute and unreliable. The permit revenue, we're currently at 37% of the year. So we're tracking higher. We aren't changing it, our projections yet, because they keep changing the regulations on us and it's a little unpredictable. So we're leaving that budget alone, or our projection alone. As I mentioned, our interest revenue, we're currently at 34% at the end of March versus 25%. So we're up there, and interest rates are continuing to increase, and some of our capital projects are looking like they're on hold, so money will continue to sit in the bank and earn interest. I will have more of an update at the next, so at the September board meeting, I'll be bringing the second quarter, and I'll hopefully have a lot more information at that point, but things are pretty much status quo at the moment.
Okay, any questions for Stacy? Okay, seeing none. We have one last item to do, and that is adjournment. Be resolved that the Board of Directors meeting be adjourned. Could I have a mover? Okay, moved down there by Helen, seconded. Okay, Mary Lou, all in favor? Carried, meeting's adjourned.